So, welcome everybody. Welcome to the Houston Cinema Arts Festival 2020, the 12th annual Houston Cinema Arts Festival. My name is Jessica Green. I am the artistic director of the festival, and particularly welcome to the post-screening Q&A for This Is My Desire. This Is My Desire, as you have now experienced, is just a incredible, remarkable, beautiful, groundbreaking, moving, just fantastic film. We are so lucky to have the co-directors of the film and to have the one of the producers of the film with us today for a Q&A. And yeah, we're just really thrilled that they're here. So we're gonna just get right into it. I want to introduce everybody. We have Chuko Asiri and we have Ari Asiri, who are twin brother co-directors of this film. They co-directed it. Chuko wrote the script for the film. And then we also have Melissa with us. Melissa is the producer of the film and is an incredible powerhouse in her own right. And this is an incredible collaboration between Nigerian filmmakers and a Nigerian producer. We're gonna talk about that. So my first question, I guess, is for the directors, but I think for all of you guys really, and you can jump in. So this film was shot on 16 millimeter. I believe it was shot, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, in 60 locations around Lagos. And I was lucky enough to first see this film at the Berlin Film Festival in February, and was lucky enough also to, be there when there was a live Q&A, when we still had live Q&As with Melissa and Chuko and Ari. And they talked a bit about Nigerian filmmaking and a kind of style and a kind of method of filmmaking generally, filmmaking in Nigeria, filmmaking as Nigerians. And I just wanted you guys to talk about that a bit, like the philosophy behind the film, your thinking, your collaboration, how you guys were collaborating, around this film, as people of Nigerian descent, and just how that dovetails with the fact that you were shooting it in all these different locations. You did shoot it on 16 millimeter. You did, as I understand it, locate yourselves, the directors did at least, in the neighborhood you were shooting in for a while. Just talk about that process, that philosophy, and how you guys collaborated around those ideas to get us started.
Right. Who wants to take that one? I think, well, we shot in 48 locations around Lagos, which was a serious undertaking in and of itself, just because of the complications with infrastructure and moving around in a very fluent manner, especially size-wise. So a lot of what had to happen was some of the stuff that you were speaking about, which Chuko has mentioned in other interviews, about getting himself acquainted with some of the neighborhoods that we're going to be shooting in, particularly the main neighborhood, Mushin, where we have the two main characters live. Chuko had spent time in that community for about, I guess, a year or so, and had rented an apartment there, which I think we used, one of them was used for Mofe's as Mofe's home. So yeah, Chuko is very familiar with that space, but we also had to spend a good amount of time in all the other locations before we got around to filming there. So really what we're talking about is sort of Melissa's jurisdiction. She was the one that had the most amount of headache, trying to make sure that we were moving between these places in a seamless manner. The shooting on 16 added its own, was its own separate thing, I think, because as Melissa will tell you, not having a film lab in Nigeria or Lagos meant shipping the film once every 3 or 4 days and waiting for for rushes to come back. Melissa can expand on that process. But I think ultimately the decision to go for these things, the decision to photograph Lagos in a very real and expansive way, and the decision to photograph it on 16 was something that we all had to agree upon before going into physical production. We knew that it was going to be a very, very difficult thing to do, but it would be very, very worthwhile. And I think for me, it was something that I felt would make the film distinct, but also that I felt the film very much deserved. So obviously that conversation between Chuka and I was not so difficult. Getting Melissa to be on board with it was another thing. Yeah. And I think so maybe Melissa can tell you a bit about it, because she's the one that suffered.
Yeah, and then again, also like the philosophy behind y'all's method, and right. And how that, you know, Melissa, you can talk about this too, you know, your ideas about, you know, expression and expressing a Nigerian style of filmmaking. That was something you guys, you know, talked about in Berlin, or an idea you have of the kind of Nigerian filmmaking you want to do, and how this practical method really, it seems to reflect, you know, a kind of deeper philosophy, or you know, I'm not sure. I'm asking. Yeah.
So actually, I want to, because it relates to The Boys, but I think in terms of what Ari was talking about, I think in terms of the philosophy, I actually think that's something that started before this film. And that's part of the reason why I kind of agreed begrudgingly to get behind the shooting on film, because Ari had been working in film for about a year. He had just done kind of a short video for a friend, Makio, that he had shot on film. And he was growing that kind of expertise. So it was somebody who was working with a director who knew how to work with film in the region. It wasn't just like a whim, like, hey, this is what I want to do because I'm a director. And then me being like, I don't care, you know, like there was actually reason behind why he wanted to shoot on film. And I think Chuko had gotten on board a lot earlier than I had, but I did kind of have faith in him and where I felt like they were going to be going cinematically. And so it was a risk. It was a risk that worked out. I did have to pray over every single reel of film that left Lagos. And thankfully nothing came back like, you know, where it was overdeveloped or had like hit somebody's x-ray and then we had to reshoot, because that's something that can very well happen. So in hindsight, it was like, it actually went really smoothly, funny enough, but during the it was a 28-day shoot, 28 days. Yeah, but 28 days, I think maybe 31 with a few overages. But yeah, during it was nerve-wracking. But in hindsight, that process went really smoothly because again, it was a process that Ari had already done. And so we were able to come in and kind of duplicate that and systematize it for a larger production unit, essentially. Mm-hmm. But yeah, now I think there's a philosophy that you guys can speak to that we're probably developing before I got there.
I think philosophically, what it really was that there has been. All right, let's look at three reasons. The first and the philosophical reason was because there had been, it was this idea of trying to add to the archive of African cinema, of West African cinema. That's what film does. It doesn't matter how much you manipulate digital images, it does not look the same. And there is like a preponderance of archival footage of West Africa, of Nigeria in particular, and it's all kind of from a Western gaze, or from, you know, it's the Queen handing back the country and so on and so forth. And we kind of felt that there was this, there is this gap in African cinema and in Black people on screen, in photographing Laos in a truly cinematic way. And that was the core idea behind putting it on 16 millimeter, particularly in the way Lagos looks, with all its colors and textures, and it has this sort of irreplaceable atmosphere, and all of that makes its way onto the lens through that medium. And we just felt it was honestly the best way to film the city. And as Ari said, it deserved to be filmed that way, or to be captured that way, rather.
Yeah. And I mean, again, y'all were entirely successful, and the risk that Melissa talked about, definitely paid off. And I mean, I have to say, some people, that I've talked to that have seen, the film have talked about just how much it resonated with them, because they really, really got a sense what life was like there, and the way that life might be in their city, in DC or Houston or wherever. And it just really gave them a sense, and I think in a fresh way, of what, everyday life is like there, and kind of like seeing their counterparts, really, right? Kind of, especially people I think that I've talked to that are in the global Black diaspora. I think this film is just really powerful, in that way, and that people can really see themselves in this real, kind of heightened way, that film is, but life is heightened, especially urban life anywhere. It is very cinematic, right? Big city life is incredibly cinematic. So I think, it's beautiful, but it's also just so real, the way you capture the life, the main characters' lives there. Speaking of which, so you wrote the script, right? Chuko, you wrote the script to the film?
I think so.
Okay. Well, that's good to know. Good to know. So can you talk a little about the choice around how you, structured the story, and breaking it up the way you did, where it's, really this two-part narrative that really follows these two characters entirely through one half, and then I think there's just one very brief overlap, right, where they are in the same frame very briefly in the film, if I'm not mistaken, at some point.
I actually think in the script they have more cross.
Interesting.
Literally just in terms of two or three scenes in which they are actually sharing the same physical space. But in the finished feature, they don't. Rosa does not share the same. Rosa and Moffat do not share the same. They don't share a scene together. But Grace, the younger sister, shares a scene with Moffat. But it grew out of it. I had the idea, or rather, what the idea for what would become it came to me about 8 years ago, and it was a very different film then. It was still very much about migration and this wanting to leave, and he was still an electrician. He's always been an electrician, and what happened was the first thing that adjusted, that changed the shape of the final script, was in my last year at NYU. A classmate of mine sent out Gina Davis's Institute's gender representation report. I think that was the first year they did it, and I found that actually I was very guilty of a lot of the troubles they had. I was actually guilty of, because Rosa was very much a secondary supporting character, and it really just grew out of a place of wanting to challenge myself to be a better writer in that respect. that's sorry. I'm laughing. It's an aside. It's an aside thing because like 2 years later, there was Oscar So White, and we had a lot of prominent white male directors saying that you couldn't force this character into this or into that. And I remember at the time thinking that was nonsense, that that's the point, you got to make a bit of an effort. So that's how it started off. And then, but when I got home and I started thinking about her as a character and where her story could go, and started thinking about what life was like as a young woman in Nigeria, she grew and grew and grew and grew. And that's how she ended up with her own chapter. And this way, I also got a chance to explore that this wanting to leave this seeking foreign shores is not something that's unique to young Africans, because it's a lot of young Africans you see on those news reports and in the detention camps and so on and so forth. And it's basically everybody just simply trying to make the best that they can for the people that they care and their loved ones. So that's how it grew, and the chapters got bifurcated, and I'm deeply influenced by literature, and usually what I'm reading tends to filter its way into what I'm writing. And at the time, I was reading Charles Dickens's Bleak House, and what I noticed what he does so remarkably is he gave the locations in that book have such specific characteristics, but he ties all them up very, very nicely. I always joke that he's the best writer. He's the best television writer that never wrote for TV. But he's got, in that book, they've got 3 distinct locations: the courts, the slums, the manor house, and all the characters are tied very much in their locales. And it was something. That was when the idea of, oh well, they can share the same space, but rather than being in the same building, and that was a note. They were in the same building, and in a draft, and Ari felt that I was making it too small. And then, by then Melissa had come on board, and we were intent on torturing her, so we made it bigger and added some locations to it. So that's how she ended up moving, and that's how the 2 chapters ended up forming. But of course, they share some spaces together: the hospital, it's just really the hospital, and then they have landlords that they cross over with. But that's how it came about. It was really just it was really, she ended up growing as a character, and that ended up making the whole piece much more expansive.
Yeah, and again, it really worked. I mean, centering Rosa in that way, I think, is part of the reason why it resonates with so many people and resonates with women. There's just so much realness there. And yeah, I mean, your comment about Dickens, agreed. His stuff was serialized in newspapers, so it was very similar to episodic television, and it was actually, that was the kind of original binge. Just waiting for the chapter of Dickens in the paper every week. I think people did that, and yeah, it's definitely a precursor to a lot of the things that are popular now, for sure. So I think at this point in the conversation, I wanted to throw out some questions, just a couple of questions for all of you guys, and so we've established that all of you really have these roots, right? In Nigeria and in the U.S., and are really kind of operating within both places and in all these different ways in terms of your work and education, maybe some more than others. I'm just really wanted to ask you all, and also just to, frankly learn, because you might, have some information you could share. I mean, you're in Nigeria right now. So in this moment, it's just, striking me, and then your backgrounds, I just think you have something particularly interesting to kind of share around this, that we're in this moment that we maybe haven't seen since the 60s, in terms of, there being in the 60s and this earlier time, this interplay between the civil rights movement in the US and the movement for independence in the continent of Africa, and this interplay between activists, these conversations that are going on between activists and leadership, people feeding off of each other. My question is, do you think we're in a similar moment around police brutality? and what's happening in the US and what's happening in Nigeria, and also what is happening in Nigeria right now. If you could, just share on that, and update us on what's going on right now. So hopefully that question makes sense. And this is really for all of you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
No, it really does. I think the short answer to the first question is yes, absolutely. I think the reason why we are seeing the protests, the EndSARS protests, is because of the Black Lives Matter movement that we had earlier on in the summer. Young Nigerians who are very well networked now and are on social media and very much connected to the outside world, were seeing African Americans, really taking to their streets and asking for very, very basic rights. And we in Nigeria got involved. And I think that sparked the conversation of, okay, well, then what are some of the things that we should be addressing in a similar manner? I think both are absolutely linked. There is
and feeding off of each other. I mean, do you think it's like a dialectic, like in the 60s, where the civil rights leaders in the US were actually learning from the independence movement in Africa? And that's, they were getting, it was back and forth. Do you think that's happening also right now?
I'm not sure whether there is concrete dialogue, whether there's a concrete dialogue being happening between both parties, but there is definitely a reflection happening. And I mean, just in December, we had the Year of Return. Right. I was in Ghana when, a whole bunch of African Americans came over, and I met and spoke to many of them that were sort of wanting to reconnect with, with the motherland and understand, their origins. So again, it's one of these things where the EndSARS movement has been, African Americans, notable African American celebrities have voiced their opinions and have, shared their platforms to educate people about what's happening. I definitely think that both are in conversation with each other. I'm not going to take up too much time because Chuko is obviously in Nigeria, and can tell us a little bit more about what the temperature is like there. But I think Melissa has a great point of view on this as well.
Yeah, please, Melissa and Chuko, if you guys could, jump in. Yeah.
As a Nigerian American that grew up in America. And we were at the march at the embassy here, 2 weeks ago, Melissa and I.
Yeah, the one right before Tuesday the 20th. So there was the one on the 21st that was always scheduled, and then the events on the 20th happened. But we were at the one before then, where it was like the EndSARS movement was still going on as just peaceful protest on the ground. But should I go or Chuko?
Yeah.
So I think that to answer your question, I think I agree with everything that Ari's saying. I think that they are mirror movements, like the Black Lives Matter movement kicked up, and then what we saw was that it spread globally. And so that started conversations, not just in Nigeria, but you saw it in France, you saw it in London, places where Black communities, while may not be kind of going through the same level of policing as the states, are still going through problems and systematic racism in the way that manifests within their respective nation states. So I think that in terms of the question that you asked, though, whether there's a dialogue, I don't think that there is a dialogue in the same way where you had actual civil rights leaders speaking with the leaders on the ground in different African countries. Like, I don't think that's happening. What I do think is happening, you're seeing a lot more of kind of artists kind of getting involved and speaking to each other and trying to use that as a means. And that's my vantage point as an artist. So you're seeing a lot more kind of artists talking to each other than I think that you're seeing this kind of global activist movement happening, in that the leaders themselves are talking to each other and trying to create a global movement. I don't think that. I think that you're having a more artistic global movement as it stands right now. So I think that's kind of like my major takeaway from this. I think you're going to be seeing different activists working on the ground. I hope that they begin to start talking to each other in a real way. I know one of the leaders or one of the founders of the Black Lives Matter movement, I believe, is a Nigerian woman, similar to me, like maybe born and raised here, but like Nigerian American. I believe her name is Opalayo.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
people like her, where she very much is in both camps. And so you might see more leaders like her kind of being the bridge, if you will. But I personally am not seeing necessarily the leaders of either group kind of speaking to each other just yet. You go.
Yeah, I mean, so what the situation currently now is re-strategize and regroup. It was very much, obviously EndSARS is the plant, is a plant that has many roots.
What is EndSARS? What is EndSARS? Can you break? Yeah.
So so the campaign, the movement actually began 3 years ago in 2017. But what it is SARS are the Special Anti-Robbery Squad. And they were set up at a time when armed robbery was massive in the country. And that's what they were set up for, kind of like a tactical SWAT sort of unit. But with over the years, they've just become, I mean, the police forces continue to degrade very rapidly, and they've just become just imagine if SWAT were allowed to mount stop and searches, and if they had this sort of level of impunity because they're coming from a background of operating above and outside of the law. So number of young people have died and gone missing, and SARS officers extorting massive amount of money from people, just effectively a rogue police unit. And this last round of protests were really kicked off by a video of a young man who was killed, actually not in the same state I'm in, not for about 45 minutes from here, a place called Ugili. And at that point, with everything that had just sort of been going on in terms of the response, the pressures of COVID, the government's lack of sensitivity, and the poor response to those most in need at that time, it was really just, okay, this has really gone too far. And that's how that wave of protests, that was at the heart of that beginning and that starting. But like Melissa and Ari have said, it's very much reflected. The Black Lives Matter movement, the EndSARS movement, they're both reflections in the same pool. That being just specifically young African Americans, young Black people, just asking for the most universal right, which is an opportunity to live. And and art has always been a place where these issues are to a degree freely highlighted. And so you're seeing that a lot with the support from artists in the States, those in the diaspora, and the groups here work, working, or rather inspiring each other in that way to seek and demand what is yours, not what you want, what is yours. And so that's kind of how it began. That's how it flourished, and now we're in a point where it's kind of, I mean, it's very exciting here because it's tipped over. As I was mentioning, we had an interview in Berlin in March, and I was saying that I was generally hopeful for Nigeria because you have a generation that's grown up demanding, like, under democracy. So the idea of army and soldiers and tanks on the street, it's not one that they're afraid of, and they're aware that democracies are supposed to look and operate like this. And also with the internet, they've seen what democracy is supposed to look like. So I definitely never predicted it would blow up. It would explode the way it did now. And right now it's like everyone's talking about getting their personal voters cards and being engaged and actively engaging in your political system, which is a message that came from the Black Lives Matter movement. It was, well, you've got the best way to get rid of these individuals or people that don't share your priorities is to go and vote them out. I think for America as a whole, you're kind of seeing it with the early voting ballots.
Sure. Yeah.
Coming in, and it's just a lot of young people that really didn't feel as though government was something that affected them or had any influence on their lives, recognizing that actually, no, it has a massive effect on your day-to-day. And I think part of being in this captive moment has heightened that. It's like, oh, these people have a lot of decision, a lot of power over how you live your life, and it behooves you to pay attention and to demand the things that are yours.
Yeah, no, totally. The idea of the pandemic is a portal. And a portal to something new. So yeah, I want to end with one final question. That's a good segue for all of you. Just, number one, Art, do you have any thoughts about this masterwork film you made that really does, deal with this theme of the desire for migration in this time when people are so, locked down where they are? In one place, if you just have any ideas about how you, if the pandemic's been a portal in any way for you around how you experience this work that you made, and super importantly, how, outside the festival circuit, is there any information around people that, have watched the film and are watching this Q&A and want to share with their friends how they might be able to see This Is My Desire at some point? Is there any information on how the film might be available down the road, and what is next for the three of you? For Melissa, Chuko, Ari, what is next for all of you? What's coming up next? Because we need to keep track of y'all all and what you are doing, because you are three brilliant people. So inquiring minds want to know what is next, the three of you.
Okay, so for going back a little bit, I think I don't know how I don't think I have really begun to feel the full effects of the lockdown and the borders being closed. I might do come Christmas if I'm not able to go back to Nigeria and spend time with my family. But what I am hoping that this does with people like your good selves sharing the film online is that it opens it up to a wider audience. I think, for example, this is a really wonderful opportunity for African Americans to see African films and get to visit Lagos through the movie. And I'm really, really interested in seeing what the Black diaspora, how the Black diaspora engages with the film. That's something that I'm very, very interested in. Obviously, a lot of the stuff that is in the film is very much in dialogue with the things that are happening now, and we're seeing how these smaller issues are symptoms of a much bigger disease. And so, I wonder if people will start seeing their lives reflected in some of the things that are happening in Lagos, and some of the things that make life, day-to-day life, a bit more challenging. I think that's what I'm most hopeful for, or most interested in. I mean, I've had someone at the AFI talk about how the film really made them feel, made them think about them migrating to Europe to do a master's, and how the themes are apparently universal, which is great to me, which is great for me. So I see it more as an immigration film, but also a film about family and ambition and desire and all those sorts of things. In terms of what we're doing next, I think we're all working on a whole bunch of things and trying to make more compelling things. I know Chuko and I definitely will be making films in Nigeria in the foreseeable future. That those are where the stories we want to tell are. That's where they live. That's where the people we know are, and the stories we know and love and grown up on. And that's it. I think, Melissa's got a whole bunch of really interesting things in different parts of the world that she's currently working on that she might be able to talk about. But we don't have any distribution plans yet, or landed distribution. So we're hoping that happens and the film's able to reach more people.
To be announced for sure. That's just a question of how and when.
Amen.
That will, I have no doubt. I feel confident saying that. You guys will figure out what's the best for you guys. You guys are smart cookies. And you're gonna do the best thing for you, for sure. Yeah.
Melissa, what are you up to?
So I'm up to a few things. Right now I'm working on a documentary called Dusty and Stones. It's about two Swaziland cowboys, or not cowboys actually, sorry. Two Swaziland country singers.
Wow.
Basically get an opportunity to compete in a battle of the bands in Texas. And it just talks about their journey going from Swaziland as these kind of hometown heroes to Texas, what they encounter, their experience in America, and then the opportunity of going back. And it's really a story about two people taking on country music in a way that they feel like it belongs to them based on the lyrics, based on what's being talked about, but country music being a very kind of white, quite frankly, white American genre, how they're able to kind of find their way in fitting in. And I'm working on a few other projects that are in development. Several of them will probably be shot in Nigeria or some part of West Africa. In terms of what I hope for the film, I mean, I hope as many people get to see it, specifically from like the global African diaspora. I feel like I love having conversations with people from Jamaica or Trinidad, Canada, where recently a bunch of those people from those areas talked to me about being able to see it in AFI and all the different things that they're able to pick up and how they're able to kind of relate to the story, especially the story of, funny enough, like people really empathize with Rosa's story. So that's been really interesting, just getting the feedback and seeing what people are attracted to in the story. I love hearing about how people feel about Legos and how much they feel like it jumps off the screen for them. Because I think that was very much one of the reasons why I was attracted to the story, even though it definitely gave me nightmares in terms of logistically how to make that happen. I'm glad that the fullness of the city really shows through in the film. And, I just hope to continue, like the boys, I just hope to continue making dope art about and by Black people.
Yeah, shout out to the actors in the film who are incredible. And shout out to Ari, what you were saying about family. I mean, the theme, I mean, that could be a whole conversation. It's just so beautifully explored, how family is explored, and so like fresh. And there are a lot of things that are just so real that you don't usually get explored. It's just, it's incredible. And I'm psyched about your country singer project. I know that there is a following of country music, right? And on the continent of Africa in some countries for a long time. So that's,
Kenya and South Africa. So I'm actually excited to see what it's like, what it feels like when it's like on the continent, and definitely in the States, but we'll see.
Yeah.
Right now I'm hoping to get this sold. So
definitely some cross sections of audiences for that film. I don't know if you're familiar with Yellow Rose, the film that's out now about a Filipino country singer whose mom is
Oh, yeah,
deported,
yeah.
and that came out this week. It was in the festival last year, so you might
Yeah.
want to check that out because it's it's great. We had it in the festival last year, and some similar DNA to what you're talking about. But I love those kind of stories. That's so exciting. I know whatever you guys are going to do is going to be amazing. So Chuko, is there anything else that you want to, any parting words you want to share as we wrap this up? Anything you want to share about what you got going on? Any hopes and dreams for the film? Anything else you want to say?
I think for the film, I would like, I think in people watching the film, I would like them to, maybe the next time you bump into someone and they don't sound like you, or you're somewhere else and there's a distinctly foreign face, to perhaps consider and think about the families they've left behind, the journey they've made, and how really at center, the two of you are searching for exactly the same thing, which is the very best that this long and short journey called life has to offer us.
So beautifully said. Thank you so much, Melissa, Chuko, and Ari. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you for your film, and the best of luck in your journey and everything you do. And thank you again. And
Thank you, Jessica.
enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you all.
Bye, guys. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.